All right, we might be 10 miles apart, but we're doing it on Zoom. Bruce Feldman, I'm Yogi Roth. We got a lot to talk about in all of Pac-12 football, but let's get right to the hottest topic of the day. And I got a feeling, Bruce, we're going to be talking about this one until a decision is made, and even beyond that, USC football. Clay Helton no longer their head coach after week 2. In comes Donte Williams, interim head coach. The search has already begun. I'm sure there's already a short list in Mike Bohn's office, but big news for USC in week 2. I'm curious for you, your reaction after the Stanford game and less than 48 hours later, SC is in
Yeah,
the coach.
Yogi, I thought watching that game, and keep in mind, Stanford did not look very good in week 1 against Kansas State. So for USC fans who had sat there and watched it, to see USC play like that, look like that, get blown off the field at home, again, this wasn't like Ohio State they played. So I think that had folks who, let's be honest, Clay has been on the hot seat since about 2018. To rewind it a little bit, I think, people who look at it as, well, why was he the head coach? And there was a lot of USC fans and some influential people, I think, who may like Clay personally, but I don't think they ever really felt like he should be the head coach out here. I think what people may not remember is, or maybe don't think that much about, is he was the stabilizer when you had that run from Lane gets fired. There was a lot of drama there. Then there was the Ed Ogeron interim stuff where there was a lot of drama in his exit. And then Sark gets in, it doesn't go well. And then he gets run out of there. And then all of a sudden it was like, okay, we need a stabilizing guy. Here was kind of the adult we're hiring to keep it on track, to get it on track. And I think in that sense, I think he did well. It was just when there was some, after Sam Darnold leaves and they start struggling, all of a sudden it's like, okay, now he's not the guy. We need to hire somebody bigger for this job. And I feel like he's been kind of hanging by a thread for 3 years, and that's a lot of pressure for him. And I think at this point, it was a bad performance early, and I think they just felt like, hey, we got to rip this Band-Aid off now.
Yeah, I can remember I hosted their end of season banquet right after Mike Bohn got hired, right? And he did the evaluation, and I think he waited about 11 days or so before deciding, which direction USC football was going to go in. And they evaluated the holistic approach to the program. And they said, whoa, USC from the East Coast or in Ohio, where Mike Bohn previously was, you think they have all the tools necessary to win. And you come in, and you and I know it. I mean, when I was there, you were around all the time at Heritage Hall. I mean, it's not even, couldn't even sniff other facilities currently. We didn't have a lot of resources then. We just kind of hit it. And that was the standard. And SC didn't have the resources that Bama, Oklahoma, Ohio State, Clemson had.
Oregon. And I mean, it was not even like there were schools in this conference that had better facilities. Like I remember this is when you were there, Yogi. Myron Rolle as a recruit, I knew back then. And I remember he was a big recruit coming out of New Jersey. He took a visit, and one of the coaches said, I don't remember if they said O.J. Simpson or they said, like some legendary player won a Heisman, sat in those very seats. And he looked at him and was like, yeah, I think these are the seats. Nothing's changed here since like 1968. Like I remember we did something when I was at ESPN magazine. It was a workout thing in the weight room. Do you remember that old weight room? It was like a high school weight room, and those are the facilities. Now they upgraded them. And, obviously now everything there now is really nice facilities wise, but just infrastructure wise, you're talking like Mike Bohn had probably been there a year and a half, 2 years before they had some of the things that most big time programs have in terms of analysts, recruiting staff, and those things. I mean, it was really lacking and it fallen way behind.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, I remember us back in the day, we kind of liked that. It was almost like, yeah, we don't need the fancy weight room. We don't need the flashy facility. And Twitter didn't exist. Social media didn't exist. Like the era of recruiting was so different under Pete Carroll than what it is today and what it was when Mike Bohn got the job. And my point of telling that story is that he said, let's stick with Clay and let's give him all the resources. And they did. They poured into it. The staff went from low 30s to mid 40s. And I've looked at every staff among the big blue bloods in college football, and SC matches right up against them with the resources now. And when you read Mike Bohn's statement or talk to people, I'm sure like you did at SC, they said, what we gave the program, we felt like what we saw in 2 weeks didn't match the expectation or the standard. And okay, that's fair, I think, in that regard. And now moving forward, while at first I was shocked, surprised by the firing this early in the season, the dialogue wasn't going to change. So now this is a team that you might be one of those guys, but most people in the media picked USC to win the South. Same people that said, hey, Clay Helton should probably get let go as well. So now here we are. They still have a talented team. They still have a team that can go win the South. So now the distractions, the questions about your head coach, if you're a player, or even to Clay Helton himself as the head coach, they're no longer there. And I'm looking forward to watching this team go compete because I think they got a chance to make some noise.
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously still talent. I mean, to me, my preseason pick for the South was actually UCLA. One of the issues that I thought was going to be a problem for them was the offensive line. Actually, that was one of the areas that hasn't looked that bad, quite honestly, so far. But look, right now I feel like they have enough talent to probably win 9 games, but what we saw the other day, it's like there's too many. It's the one thing to not have your A game. It's another thing when you have like your C game. They're not that much. This isn't like they're talented. They're not talented like they were when you were on that staff. They're not talented even like they were when Lane was there, when they just didn't have a lot of numbers, but at least the front line was really good. I don't think there's, NFL scouts going through there and going, okay, we got like 9 guys who could be top 50 picks when they come out. Yeah, you like both of the Drakes on offense and defense. But I think after that, I think when you look at like real difference makers, I don't think they have it at this point. And quite honestly, that's to me as much an indictment of when you have a head coach who's been on the hot seat that long, that's not hard to recruit against for somebody to go, yeah, he's not going to be here in 2 years. You don't know who these position coaches are going to be because it's going to change. And so now they did that. And now we'll see. We'll see what Donte Williams can do. Obviously, he's done a good job establishing relationships with recruits, and I think recruits have bought into that. I mean, one of the things that, I watched the Trojan Live interview he did on Monday night, and I think, like we got to eliminate the stupid mistakes. Absolutely. It's one of those things that's probably easier said than done, though. And I'm interested to see how I'm interested to see how the staff responds. Sometimes when you have an interim situation, one of the challenges of it is a lot of other guys are looking around the room going, hey, how come he's getting this opportunity and not me?
Yeah. I think there's a lot of dynamics here that are going to shake out. As we spin it forward to SC, we've seen coaches win there. We've seen coaches lose there. We've seen coaches get let go there. I'm curious your take on what you think they need in a head coach, and then I'll share mine.
I think they need somebody with a presence who can get the fan base excited. I think they need somebody who will have a clear identity on what he wants. I think when Clay, I'm not saying this was the reason why Clay got fired, but when Clay kind of pivoted to the air raid, I think you go all in on that. I mean, now look, it's worked out for Lincoln Riley because he has a great run game guy in Bill Bedenbaugh, but I think he also, that guy is tied so much to what OU football is. Whereas how many offensive line coaches has this program had in the last 10 years? 8 or something? It's like, that's to me the hardest thing to do, especially when it's tied into your identity, right? Like, I mean, honestly, look across town. UCLA has turned in part because the head coach knows what he's looking for. The players know what he's looking for. The offensive line coach is now the OC, and he's been part of this journey. So I think it fits together. That's what I think they need. I think what I think they have to be careful about is not getting somebody who's like, just wants to jump in front of the spotlight and kind of looks at this as like I think there's some guys who may end up being more style than substance. And I think USC needs to be careful on that part of this. There's going to be names that are going to be thrown out that I think you'd say, all right, that guy doesn't fit here, or that guy doesn't probably fit in what they're trying to do. Or I think they got to be, there's not much they can do about what the media is going to say about some of these, but there's certainly some candidates. I'm like, I know some of these people, they're not going to even consider that job because, it's not at that point of their lives where they want to do something like that. But I think it's hard to control that narrative, especially with, like you said, we're going to be talking about this all season because it's the USC job, and there's going to be I suspect there are going to be some big names who are going to be at least intrigued by the job. Whether they would chase it is another story.
Yeah, I mean, I think when we've seen all the short lists come out, any average fan could put together that short list, right? It's whoever's had success currently in college, maybe in the pros or out of the game, So I think this will take a life of its own. I'm curious how it shakes out. This is what I think that SC needs. I think they need someone with experience as a head coach. To your point, I think the fan base wants that. I think somebody, to your point, who's kind of done it before. In regard to that, I think impeccable character is like number one. I think if you've got any sketchy past, I don't think that's going to fly at SC, and I don't think it should. I think two, recruiting is such a big deal, but to me, it's more about like a likable personality. You don't have to be Pete Carroll, like that incredible personality and persona that he had. But I think in college now with these big jobs, especially here in LA, as we both know, you got to connect with donors, with alum. You're in LA, you got to have a likable personality in that regard. I don't think a Belichickian personality who just came in and said, yeah, I'm just going to do X's and O's. I don't think that's going to fly in this job. And then thirdly, I really believe that you need a head coach who's really committed to a style of play. Like really committed to an identity.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I say that because, and I tell this to young quarterbacks at Elite 11 every year when they're, asking for advice on their college decision. I say, look, man, if you're good, your OC shouldn't be there your whole career. Just the nature of the business, unless they want to be there because of family or they just love the job so much. Same thing at SC. It's going to launch coaches out of it if you're good. So if you're a head coach and you're committed to, we're going to do this on offense, or if you're defensive minded background, we're going to do this. I think that's really good for this, right? There's few and far between head coaches. Dabo is one of them. Didn't call a play. PJ Fleck never called a play. Like there's not a lot of Power 5 coaches who weren't
Urban
a coordinator.
Meyer called a play. Jim Harbaugh was not an OC. I mean, there are guys like that.
Right, but I think fair. Those guys have identities in terms of what they want to be for the latter two on the offensive side of the ball. I think that is critical for this thing because you're going to lose coaches, and I think you need to be entrenched in a style of play for SC to stay with that style of play versus changing when you bring in different coordinators.
How important do you think it is that this person has strong West Coast ties or has worked out on the West Coast?
I don't think it's as important as is made out to be all the time. I think you have to have an understanding of the Pac-12. I think I'd imagine a lot of people are going to offer Donte jobs, right? Because he's incredible at what he does. SC, I would imagine whoever gets this job is going to try to retain him for obvious reasons. I think you have to have been out here. I think most people have been out here and have had ties to the West Coast in some area.
But a lot of recruiting, Yogi, I mean, like there's some guys that I think are really successful head coaches at smaller programs, but they're so tied into the region of the country they're from. And I know the conversations I've had with some people, I'm like, I don't know if I could see that person, whether they'd want to move their family to, it's expensive out here. It's a different quality of life. I am curious as to how that piece plays out. As you said, you can hire staffers with strong connections out here. But I think that I'm interested to see what their list kind of becomes and what are non-starters. Because I agree with you on that. Everybody's going to want to have a guy with impeccable character. But a lot of times there are guys who get a lot of jobs just because they know they're going to either recruit really well or they have a track record to win a lot of football games.
Yeah, I kind of net out at, I think a lot of head coaches we've talked to that are current head coaches, there's ways you can look at this job and be like, yeah, I don't know if I want to move my family or cost of living or whatever. Bro, we've been around this too long. It's still one of the best jobs in all of football. And I think you get few and far opportunities. As we know, you could be the hottest guy in the country one year and the next year not get any job offers. So I still think the USC brand, and you look at where they're positioned in LA with recruiting, media rights deal coming up in the Pac-12. Like there's so many appealing elements to this thing. And then add in what we started this conversation with, all the resources given, and I'd imagine the control given to operate it however you deem appropriate. I think if someone initially thinks, yeah, I don't know if I want that, I don't know if I want to move the family out, I don't know if I want this adjustment in my life, man, I think it's going to be really hard for people to turn this job down that are rising in college football or have always wanted a shot at a blue blood place, at a place you can win big at, to say no to it. So it'll be interesting and of course compelling as we move this thing on. As we wrap up here, Bruce, for you, is there a must-have for USC football moving forward? Not only in the current season, the 10 games they have left for the current program, but as they move forward and end up selecting the next leader of the football program?
I honestly think they can't settle for, look, they're going to get whoever, they land on. But, sometimes I hear some of the names. I'm like, really, that guy, USC would end up with that person? I'm like you, I think it's a top 5, top 6 job in college football. Sometimes you're kind of beholden to the timing of who's available at that point. And look, honestly, sometimes the home run hire guy, especially the guy with connections, that doesn't always work out, right? I mean, Nebraska struggled with Scott Frost. Michigan has struggled with Jim Harbaugh. I thought both were home run hires, and they still may work out. But, it's such a moving target, right? And so, I'm very curious to see who they end up really targeting, because the bar is so high, right? People remember USC for the Pete Carroll run, and I think they forget that Pete was like the 5th choice, right? So, that's why these things are so fascinating to me. I'm not sure there's the home run hire guy right now. As I look at it realistically, I know there's some names that have been thrown out, and I was like, yeah, that guy is. I don't think that's realistic at all. But from the coach's standpoint, but I don't know. That's what makes this stuff so interesting. And look, I mean, the reality is, if Donte Williams goes 10-0 the rest of the way, maybe Donte Williams gets the job.
Yeah, I'll leave on this, and I really believe this. I think there are a lot of extremely talented prospects for this job. I really think in coaching, we can get in a world where head coaches get recycled at different jobs. And you and I both know, whether it's coordinators or guys who interview for jobs, maybe it's not publicized, or head coaches that maybe haven't taken a run at a bigger job. There's a lot of talent out there. I don't think there's only 2 or 3 or 5 guys that could go get USC back to where their fans and administration expect them to be. So I look forward to it. And the thing that's going to be interesting is the timing, to your point. Right? This decision isn't going to be made by the end of September, by the end of October, probably not by the end of November, right? It's going to be a minute before this thing shakes out. And I just got to trust that Mike Bohn, Brandon Sauce, they're going to do all the detailed, diligent work, say, okay, who do we want to go offer this job to? And I imagine it being very clean, right? I don't imagine a lot of things being out in the public. And I think that's probably better served. Because I believe this, and I'll say this to the USC fans who now have a new interim head coach, go support the team now. Be about the seniors. They got the most super seniors in the Pac-12. Go show out for them when they come home and play a night game on FS1 against Oregon State. And give these guys who came back to play this game at the storied Coliseum the cheers that they deserve. I'd love to see that for USC football in a year where they make another change at the head coaching position.